Hi, I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome back to the S.M.A.R.T Performance Podcast, where S stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive problem solving, R for rhythmic operations, T for building a thriving community, and of course, P for performance. I'm really happy to have Jim with me today here, as we are going to be diving into authentic leadership. You've heard me say it so many times. There are so many wonderful, highly technical people who get recruited into leadership, but they never really find the inspiration or the guidance or the support they need to become high performing leaders as well. So that's the topic we're going to be talking about. Of course, go to the Dutch Mentor app in the Apple Store, download it today, and go on your journey, because through only action will you receive the best results. Jim, thank you very much for being here today, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Jim Carlough. I have been in the healthcare leadership for over 35 years. I've mentored hundreds of people over the last 25 and almost 30 years. And I've been coined the leadership identity architect because I change leaders' identities. And it's a simple premise. What we do today, many places around the world, we don't do succession planning like they used to do in the 90s and the 80s. And when it's time to promote somebody into a management position, we typically take the best technical resource we can find, congratulate them, give them the title of leader or manager. They go home and they tell their spouse, I'm a manager. We just got a $10,000 pay raise. And the spouse says, but you've never managed anybody. And it all of a sudden starts to sink in. And then you get imposter syndrome and can I really do this? And how do I do it? And panic. And so I solved that. I wrote a book a year and a half ago, called The 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership. This has led to not only the book being a bestseller on Amazon, but I've also introduced workshops for corporations to make their leadership better, and also have made it an individual cohort for those people who want to make themselves better. In addition, I have a lot of other content that I push out that I help people with and mentor on a one-on-one basis. And that kind of encompasses everything that I do in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. A very interesting space. You and I share a passion to help people through that valley of despair, as I call that. So before we get into the people portion of it, or the human behavior portion of it, why do you think that companies today have become short-sighted by not having proper succession planning? Is it pure laziness, or is it that they were not taught the right way?
I think it's funding. I think it starts with funding. As margins have gotten narrower and people are more focused on the bottom line and growth, you take out the extras, the things, the family, the Christmas party or the company picnic, or whatever it is. In a lot of places, it's the training programs. And so in a lot of places, the training programs consist of them hiring somebody to come in from the outside to teach them a theory or 2 habits that they have to do every day, and they'll be better at it. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't really change their identity. These people have never managed before, and we need to be able to educate them on how to interact with people, how to show up the same way every day, despite the stress or despite what you're going through. There's got to be some consistency in that. And so in my world, I change their identity all around that. And what's interesting is I did this with the focus on corporate America, but I have had a following outside of the corporate world. I have been approached to talk to a podcast of stay-at-home moms who struggle with showing empathy and compassion, and a lot of other groups that I never expected, school principals, teachers, even executive chefs. And when I was invited to go to this executive chef's show, I said, I don't know why they need leadership. You got an executive chef and he's got the biggest knife. Everybody's going to follow and listen to him. But that's just not what happens. You've got to keep that machine running and that assembly line, because if one person falters, the product that goes out of the kitchen is not satisfactory.
Yeah, it is. Listen, on the end of the day, we manage process and we lead people. And I don't care what industry you're in. If you're in a leadership position, you have to learn to inspire lead with clarity, and get people to follow you as well as you lead. I just want to go back to the why of the companies. Really, two things that I always talk about. McKinsey came out with a very interesting study in 2021 that 95% of executive leaders truly believe that leadership development is a key to the success of the company, but only 5% of those actually executed upon that in a meaningful manner. And we see this all the time, that they will put a cohort together of senior leaders or people who have been identified as people who are, the future of the company. 20 or 30 people go into a cohort while they have 60,000 people who work for the company, of which 6,000 are deemed to be leaders. You're leaving out, the big portion of it. And people always forget that 90% of the front line reports to that middle manager, who gets the least amount of support. And that is really the kind of, what you're talking about, is that where we need to find that right solution. And it starts with the identity of being a professional leader. You go to business school, you learn theory, but you don't learn how to become a professional leader. And that is really kind of like the area I would love to dive a little deeper in with you. So you talk about identity. What do you mean? What is your interpretation of the word identity? And then how do you start shaping that or starting that conversation?
That's a great question. So when I talk identity, I'm talking about how the person perceives themselves. Once they get that manager job and they slowly realize, they start to question whether or not they're capable of leading. And nobody's given them permission to lead or direction to lead. They just put that person into the environment and they wish them the best of luck. So what I do is, in the principles that I teach, I start to focus on the things that will make them different and will make them the leader that other people will follow. The perfect example of that is the voluntary resignations that we see in organizations. My overall attrition rate is under 5%. In the US today, voluntary attrition accounts for 10 to 15% of the resignations a year. I can cut that in half by changing the leader's identity and how they approach the leadership role.
A very interesting statistic, and I work primarily in healthcare, and you can triple that. It's almost 30%, of which 64% of the workforce at or near burnout, especially on the management level. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there about recruiting, retaining, and of course the cost of turnover is exceptionally high, but cannot be found on the P&L. Thinking about that, the identity of the person, right? It is to really say, who am I today, raising that self-awareness. So the first step is recognition, right? It is that I need to admit, and often what we see is that pride and ego gets in the way, and you set your standards high, but when you're not meeting them, you're lowering your own standards to feel that you at least have a sense of accomplishment. So what are no different if I get the flu, I get the chills, and I get an increased temperature, I get a headache, I get body pains. What are some of the symptoms that people should be looking for when they're in that crisis, identity crisis? I've been promoted as a highly technical person. Now I'm putting in a leadership role. Now I need to ask for help.
The first thing that happens is the new leader ends up continuing to be an individual contributor, because when people bring him the problem, he or she helps them solve it or solves it for them, instead of coaching and explaining, here's how I would approach this, and encouraging the person to think through it more, to come up and come back with something that kind of mirrors what we're trying to get to. And that's the first step of trying to recognize when a leader is struggling. When that leader is taking on all of the work of the department they now run, people are going to continue to give him or her that work, just because they're willing to do it. And it makes their life easier. But that's not how it should work. It should work in the reverse. And as a leader, it is my responsibility to notice when I think you're struggling. And I need to look for things like, when you're walking in with your cup of coffee in the morning, are you smiling like you do every other day? If you're not smiling, something's happened between home and work, or something that I need to dig into to try to support you with. And so it even gets to that finite of a detail. And so many leaders miss that. They miss the opportunity to bridge that gap and to show not only their human side of leadership, but also show that they have that I or you have their back in all of this. And I think that's the two hardest things to learn, or three hardest things to learn, are integrity, compassion, and empathy. And those are the first three pillars. And integrity to me is non-negotiable, because if you don't operate with absolute integrity, if you try to show compassion or empathy, it won't be believed, and you won't get the following. And some of the other aspects as well. So it really starts with the recognition of my responsibility, and my responsibility is to lead, not to do the work, and then taking it from there.
Yeah, that's great, but integrity equals trust. Without trust, there is no nothing else, right? It is you can engage, have a high engaged group, but if they don't trust you, then how can you ever get to a level of performance that is desired? So yeah, really good stuff. Interesting enough, I find that women are better at recognizing that they need help and ask for help than men. Men's egos and pride still get in the way that I need to do this on my own, or I'll struggle my way through it. And again, too many of them never reach their full potential. And of course, their bosses should recognize that. And when people go from doing to leading but continue to do, as you expressed, is really that critical symptom. So having said that, so servant leadership, situational type leadership, leading with confidence, but humility speaks to those three pillars that you have. So what is it that people can do, right? So what are the action steps people should take to kind of look inward a little bit first? So to recognize where they are today, and what are the first steps that they should take to try to change that pattern of believing, start changing that identity that you're talking about.
So the first step in anything, and as you said, it is self-identification that you're not where you think you should be. That is the key to it. The second part of it is you have to be very careful about just going out and picking up a book and trying to implement a book. Most leadership books work or focus on theories. They don't work and think about or teach practical application. And so in my book and in my workshops, we teach the application, or we'll teach integrity. We'll talk about integrity in the business world. We talk about how to implement it if you don't have that characteristic today. And personally, I think the world needs more integrity. I think around the world, we've gotten away from the integrity of our own country, of our own people, anywhere you go, in corporate America or even small town USA. There are people that don't have integrity, and we've got to get back to that old golden rule of I will treat you as exactly how I would want to be treated myself. And it starts there, because employees or leaders or managers, if they can grasp that concept and start on that path, I can show improvement in them in 14 days. And then it continues from there as we continue to educate them on each of the other pillars and then how to implement them. But I go a step further. In addition to talking about, I'm a storyteller, so I mostly tell it through stories because it makes it real as you read the capability or as you attend a workshop. But I also tell the people who are attending other leaders whose names they would recognize who use that characteristic in their leadership style. For example, we talked integrity. And with that, I talk about Satya Nadella, the chairman of Microsoft. When he arrived in 2014, he laid down the rule that we were going to operate with absolute integrity. And that's rule number one. And he transformed that organization and got that organization up to speed, and then brought that throughout the entire Microsoft family of companies. And so you're reading about it in my book, but then you're also getting references to other people that you can go learn about and how they do those things. And so I from a practical perspective, I don't proclaim myself the ultimate chief of leadership, I have been highly successful. I can teach you the way I've been highly successful, but I can also direct you to other people who have used similar things and have been equally successful or more.
Yeah, very interesting pathway, and really it starts by doing something, right? It is that if you can sit here and listen all day long, and that's part of the problem that in our organization, our world of healthcare, we had the National Conference of the American Council of Healthcare Executives in Houston, Texas, this past week from actually from Saturday. It's wrapping up today. Thousands of people went there, all enthusiastic, inspired, good educational session, great networking opportunities, and now they come home to 400 emails. And if you ask them in a week from now, or even in a couple of days from now, what they heard or what they learned, most of that is long forgotten. Right, 95% is attributed very, very quickly. So when you talk about a 2 week journey or of action steps, so what is it that somebody can do today to start building those healthy habits that helps them get closer to their true identity, or at least align that identity to some of the proven effective strategies of integrity, pragmatism, clarity, good communication. What would you suggest people do to make it something of who they are, not just something else that they do?
What I give them is, and it's available on my website, is a leadership assessment. It's self-done. You don't turn it in and it doesn't get graded. You self-grade it, but it'll tell you the areas where you're strong and where you're weak in. And those become focal areas. Now, in my workshops and in my cohorts, what we do is in between the sessions, there's homework and there's practice stuff, but we also do a lot of role playing. I mean, as you get into the thing that I see all the time is people struggle when we do the exercises on compassion and empathy because they're similar, but they're different. And they're both important. And so we end up getting into a discussion of which is more important. Well, they're both important because you're going to use them in different situations. But taking that first step is to really find out where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are from a leader perspective. From there, we can focus on the pillars and which ones you need to spend extra focus on. And in that arena, I offer other solutions such as ebooks that are designed specifically for one of the pillars. So my book is 174 pages, easy, quick read, implementable easily. It can sit on the desk and be a reference thing. If you're having trouble with compassion, I have another ebook on compassion that's 280 pages. I mean, it's a book in and of itself. If you are struggling in that area in the workshop, and so there's other tools that I can bring to the person to help them dig in deeper as they do it. You can't implement all 6 pillars at the same time. You've got to start with one. And my suggestion is you start with integrity because it is when I think of integrity, and if you think of a building with columns, integrity is that center pillar that's holding up the peak of the roof, the heaviest part of the building. If you break that integrity pillar, everything else is shattered.
Yep.
Nobody will trust you. Your team won't collaborate with you. They'll sense a distance between you. If you send them to a workshop 3 days later when there's a crisis, they're going to forget everything they learned at the workshop, and it goes down from there. But everything is practical and implementable.
Excellent. Listen, you and I can talk about this probably for 8.5 hours straight, but I always promise the audience to keep it sharp and set them up for success. And I think this first step you talked about is a good place to leave it. Where can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn. My name obviously is on the screen here. I have a website, which is just jimcarlough.com. So squeeze all the letters, 2 names together and put a www in front of it and a .com at the end of it. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. But the best place is where you can learn more about my book and learn more about the programs I'm offering is my website. And it has some free resources on there as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, I'm going to certainly check it out, and I recommend that all the listeners today too. Your first action item here is to actually go do something and go to jimcarlough.com and at least retrieve the free resources and consider buying his book. Any parting thoughts or quote?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that the worst lie in business is that leaders are born that way. And if people are telling you you can't lead because you didn't get that gene, don't believe it. If that myth was true, I would not have been as accomplished as I am. My dad was a carpenter. His dad was a mason. My great grandfather was a chicken farmer. There is no CEO in any of them. And so leadership is a deliberately developed activity and passion, and you have to have a passion for it. And it's ever changing. And it starts, I often get the question, when do you think leadership starts? It's not when you arrive at the office. It's when your feet hit the floor and you get out of bed in the morning.
100% correct, and I think that everybody needs to remember that if you say I'm not a leader, that's not true. We're always leaders of self. Right? It's a good training ground to start really recognizing and understanding your identity. Jim, thank you very much for your valuable insights today. These are actionable and meaningful to the audience. Thank you for sticking with us. Again, without taking a meaningful action or starting building healthy habits and behaviors, and start with yourself, start inward, and then you can be outward looking. Again, if you want to go to the Apple Store, download the Dutch Mentor mobile app. It will help and guide you through some of these steps as well. And of course, I encourage you to reach out to Jim as well. We'll see everybody at the next session. Thank you very much. Jim, have a wonderful day today.
You too, sir.